walking with Jesus from day to day, trusting his promise to help us along the way. Trials will come, but he'll carry us through. There's nothing my Jesus, the Son of God, can do. With Jesus building bridges to life, yeah. Where we're breaking down the barriers, we'll do it with our Savior in mind, becoming believers in Christ, yeah. At Arlington Road, we're picking up the pieces, oh yeah. At Arlington Road, not our way, but God's way. At Arlington I wanna be a Christian in my heart, oh Lord. Through the cleansing flood, I'll go, yeah.
Well, good morning and welcome to our Bible study. And we're in Mark chapter 3. Mark chapter 3. And I'm going to do a little bit of review to get us caught up. And but I want to focus on verses 20 and 21. Mark chapter 3, verses 20 and 21. Get this. Okay, there we go. All right. If I had to give a title to today's lesson, I would call it Jesus, Maniac, Manipulator, or Messiah. And the reason I'm choosing those three titles is because that's pretty much how people saw Jesus at this particular time in his ministry. We're going to read a passage where it talks about Jesus being called mad. They thought he was mad, which really means they thought he was crazy. And then some people just didn't believe what he said, and they thought he was lying and he was trying to manipulate the people. But what we know that Mark is trying to emphasize from the very beginning is that Jesus is the Son of God, and being the Son of God, he is the Messiah. So I want us to be thinking about that. Jesus, how people looked at Jesus then, and then even how people look at Jesus now. Some of them see him as mad or a maniac, and then some see him as a manipulator, or even like a liar, someone who just didn't tell the truth. Because, we're going to look at the claims that Jesus made. And what I'm going to try to do is put everything together of how people saw Jesus and what they were saying about him. And this might be the reason that his family took the position that they took in Mark chapter 3, verses 20 and 21. So, all right. I'm off my month-long sabbatical, and we're back to the in-person Bible study. All right, Mark chapter 3, and I'm starting here, but then I'm going to back up. Then the multitude came together again, so that they could not so as much eat bread. But when his own people heard about this, they went out to lay hold of him, for they said, he is out of his mind. And if you keep reading, it's kind of hard to stop here. Jesus is going to make a statement at the end of this chapter about his mother and his brothers, and the multitude is going to tell him that his family is looking for him outside, and Jesus makes a statement, who is my mother and who is my brother? And then he makes a statement that whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and my mother. All right, Mark begins the gospel by explaining who he thinks Jesus is. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So Mark begins the gospel by letting us know, okay, Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is going to come on the scene making that statement that he's the Son of God. He's going to come on the scene performing miracles, and then he's going to perform these miracles on the Sabbath day, which is really going to disturb a lot of people. And so what I'm trying to do, this may not be correct, but this is what I'm trying to do. By the time we get down to verse 20 or 21, where it says they thought he was out of his mind, I'm going to not justify. I'm not going to justify why they said that, but I'm going to give you perhaps the reason why they thought he was out of his mind. So verse 21, but when his own people heard about this, they went out to lay hold of him, for they said he is out of his mind. So what is it that they heard? What is it that's in their mind at this particular time? If you remember, we talked about the 5 controversy stories in the Gospel of Mark. There are 5 controversy stories. Now, if I was in class, if I had students, I would actually ask the student, this is what I would grade them on. This is what I would want you to take notes about, the 5 controversy stories. And I think that if you look at these 5 controversy stories, by the time we get to Mark chapter 3:21, you might understand why some people are thinking that Jesus is mad or he's out of his mind, because who would do these kind of things on the day that is done? So one of the questions I want you to be thinking about is, why do they feel this way about Jesus? Why do they think that Jesus is crazy, mad, out of his mind? This verse means a lot to me because there was a national lectureship in Dallas years ago, and this was my topic, the madness of Jesus. And I cannot find that sermon to save my life, but I remember giving that title, the madness of Jesus. Why did people think that Jesus was crazy? Well, in Mark chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, you'll find the first controversy story, or the first story, according to Mark, that created controversy, that made Jesus a controversial figure. He forgave sin. And those who are familiar with that passage of scripture, they said, who can forgive sin? Only God can forgive sin. Well, what they didn't realize is God is forgiving sin, okay? Jesus is the Son of God, and by being the Son of God, he has the authority and the power to forgive sin. The second controversial story is found in Mark chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. Mark chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. And Jesus is eating with tax collectors, and he's eating with the sinners. That created controversy. I mean, here's somebody claiming to be the Son of God, and look who he is associating with. So that created controversy. The first one is forgiving sin. Mark chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. The second one is Mark chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. The third controversy was fasting. Mark chapter 2, verses 18 through 22. You know, Jesus was being scrutinized over everything that he did. I mean, they're watching everything that he did. They're listening to everything that he saying, not for learning or accepting. Now, we're going to find, even in this lesson today, that there are two groups that oppose Jesus, the Pharisees and the Herodians. Well, and then the third group are the group that followed Jesus, because many people are coming to him. He's healing folk, and he goes out in a desolate place. They find him. So you got three groups of people. You got the Pharisees and the Herodians, who are opposed to Jesus. And then you got the group that are being healed and they're accepting the teaching of Jesus. When this third controversy about fasting comes up, Jesus makes a statement about new wineskins, and we talked about that, and we talked about how even today people are misrepresenting the concept of new wineskins. You know, Jesus is really trying to show them that grace, he represents grace, as opposed to the law of Moses. Today, we use new wineskins. Well, I say we. Some use new wineskins to go against the teaching or the traditional teaching of the church or the routines of the church, what we've been taught in the church. And I think that we are misappropriating the concept of new wineskins. Jesus was contrasting Judaism with Christianity. Judaism is the old wineskin. Christianity is the new wineskin. So when it comes to what we do in the church today, it's unfair to say that the new trends and the new movements that people are trying to do are the new wineskins, and the way we've been taught to do things are the old wineskins. So it's a misrepresentation. So whenever you hear people talking about new wineskins, biblically, the new wineskins was Christianity versus Judaism, not liberalism versus what people call conservatism or fundamental teaching. So the first controversy, people who are online, they can see it, but for those who are in class, what's the first controversy? Forgiving sin. All right. Second controversy. All right. Eating with sin. And the third, oh, y'all get 100. Y'all own it today. All right. The fourth one can be found in Mark chapter 2, verses 23 through 28. And the fourth controversy has to do when Jesus picked grain on the Sabbath day. Now, we're going to talk about that today, what you could and could not do on the Sabbath day, and how important the Sabbath day was to the Jew. The reason I'm taking this approach is to try to get a understanding of why they thought Jesus was crazy, because he forgave sin. He ate with tax collectors and sinners. He talked about the new wineskins, the fasting, and now he's picking grain on the Sabbath day. And then the fifth one is in Mark chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. He heals on the Sabbath day. In Mark chapter 3, verses 1 through 6 is this man with a withered hand. The man has a withered hand, and Jesus heals that man on the Sabbath day. Hold your thought on the Sabbath day, and let me, because I'm trying to get through the third chapter, and I'm not going to get through all of the third chapter, but I'm going to get through most of it. So along with those 5 controversial stories in the life of Jesus, On top of that, he selects 12 men as his apostles and disciples. They become disciples first, and then they become apostles. So here's a man claiming to be the Son of God. And here's a man who is going into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, healing. Here's a man who's teaching with authority, and those who hear his teaching is astonished. And then he gets ready to go out on a mission, and he selects 12 men, but notice the type of men that he chose. 12 ordinary men, but diverse men. 4 of them are fishermen. All right. A group of brothers, 2 sets of brothers. James and John are brothers. Peter and Andrew are brothers. 4 fishermen are going to turn, Jesus selects them to be part of the group that turns the world upside down. Not only are there 4 ordinary men who fish for a living, and I got on Facebook on our Arlington Road page, my son and I, we went fishing yesterday, and we sat in those chairs y'all gave us. Oh, and it was so comfortable. Oh man, I was telling Corey, man, I could just relax in this thing, you know. So we put it to use yesterday. But 4 of them are fishermen, which is an ordinary occupation. I mean, nothing glamorous about it. It might have been profitable financially, but nothing glamorous about it. Then he picks Matthew. And what was Matthew's occupation? Tax collector. How did the Jews feel about tax collectors? All right. Hated them. I mean, a tax collector is a traitor. Here's a man that has traded, bought into the Roman government and is just trading and profiting off of us. And then there's a man by the name of Simon. One of the gospel writers, it might be Matthew, calls him Simon the Canaanite. Others will call him Simon the Zealot. Well, Mark calls him the Canaanite in the New King James Version. There are other versions that will call him the Zealot. Now, I read a couple things about the Zealot. One says that he was zealous. He was a zealous person, which might mean he was hyper, he was super excited, enthusiastic. But the way that I lean and what I've always thought is there were a group of individuals called zealots who were like political activists. Now, I need to probably do a little bit more research because some people say that the zealots did not organize until later and perhaps after the time of Jesus. But if my memory is correct, I think that when Simon is called the zealot, they might use a capital Z, which means a party is being represented. I'm going to lean toward him being a political activist because it makes sense to show the diversity of men that Jesus selected to be his apostles. So we got the 5 controversial stories. Then he selects 12 men. Out of the 12, half of them are all of them are ordinary men, but half of them you can point your finger at: 4 fishermen, 1 publican, and 1 political activist. I wonder what their business meetings was like. I wonder when you get those kind of personalities in a room, one of the things that I can say about those 12 men, for the most part, except for Judas, and even Judas for a certain period of time, is they followed Jesus. Even though they are 12 men with different backgrounds, they had confidence in Jesus because when he called them, they followed. Now, we can read other passages of scriptures when Jesus wasn't around and they had their conversations about which one of us is the greatest. They would have conversation, which one of us is going to get the chief seat. So it's like that. When the leader is not around, people will share their thoughts. But when the leader comes back to them, he gets them centered, focused, on the right page. It's not like that in the kingdom. You don't need to be thinking about who's the greatest. Now, Jesus didn't twist their arm and say, well, y'all cannot think like that. But what he did try to do is transform their thinking. You are the leaders, and a leader is a servant. So you got to get this Gentile mentality out of your heart. We're not carnal, we're spiritual. So it was a lesson learned along the journey. And they had to keep learning these lessons. So now I'm putting all that together. I'm putting all of this together. The 5 controversial stories, the fact that Jesus selected 12 ordinary men to follow him with the agenda, he is the Son of God. He is the Messiah. Well, by the time we get to verse number 20, then the multitude came together again so that they could not so much as eat bread. But when his own people heard about this, they went out to lay hold of him, for they said he is out of his mind. So what perhaps I'm suggesting that what they heard is these controversial stories, and especially him healing on the Sabbath day. What's so important about the Sabbath day? Why would people have heartburn about the Sabbath? Well, for the Jew, all work was forbidden on the Sabbath day. The Jew did not work on the Sabbath. In their mind, we're going to get the work done in 6 days. we can learn something from that. But the Sabbath day is holy. And the Jew was definite and detailed about it. Let's say someone got sick on the Sabbath day and needed medical attention. According to the Sabbath laws, medical attention could be given only if life was in danger. So you didn't go to the emergency room on the Sabbath day. You didn't go see a doctor on the Sabbath day. If you had a migraine or allergy reaction, if you were sniffing and coughing, you didn't get medical attention on the Sabbath day. Only if your life was in danger. Are y'all with me? That's how important the Sabbath day was. All right. A woman in childbirth might be helped on the Sabbath. So if a woman was giving birth to a baby, they would make an exception for her, but an infection of the throat might be treated. If a wall fell on anyone, enough might be cleared away to see whether the person was dead or alive. If he was alive, he might be helped. But if he was dead, the body had to be left until the next day. Now, keep in mind how detailed these Sabbath laws were, but also keep in mind how meticulous they had to be taught. Now, we can criticize the Pharisees, which we do, but let's give the Pharisees credit for teaching. Now, the way they kept the law is where the criticism come, but they did teach. If someone broke a bone, a fracture could not be attended to. So in other words, if you broke a bone, don't break it on the Sabbath day, because nothing could be done. Cold water couldn't be poured on a sprained hand or foot. A cut finger might be bandaged with a plain bandage, but you couldn't put ointment on it. So on the Sabbath day, the most you could do is keep an injury from getting worse, but you couldn't do anything to make it better. So don't fall on the Sabbath day. Don't get sick on the Sabbath day, because you're in bad shape. So when did Jesus heal people? On the Sabbath day, all right? Now, watch what Jesus does. So I'm thinking I'm going to take that position. I'm going to take the position that along with him making the claim that he's the Son of God, and along with him healing on the Sabbath day, these are the things that people are having difficulty with. That's the position I'm going to take. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that position. But what gets me is that there was some of his own. Now, according to biblical history, Jesus is the firstborn child to Mary and Joseph. But from reading other passages of scripture, we find that Jesus had brothers, and I think he had sisters. Now, it's one thing when the public has problems with you, you might be able to handle that. It's another thing when the public and your family got problems with you, because where do you get comfort? Where do you get support? Where do you get relief if everybody that you bumping into think you're crazy? Turn over to Matthew chapter 7, and I think it's verse number 5. Matthew chapter 7, verse number 5. And we'll start with verse number 1, just to kind of get some context out of this. And I need the King James version when I get the, and maybe another version. After these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he did not want to walk in Judea, because the Jews sought to kill him. Now, the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles was at hand. His brothers therefore said to him, "Depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you're doing. For no one does anything in secret while he himself seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." Verse 5, for even his brothers did not believe in him. Does it say it different in the King James? Anybody got the King James? John chapter 7. What did I say? Well, y'all can call me crazy. I am so sorry. Okay. John chapter 7. Yeah. Well, if the multitude said I said Matthew, I said Matthew. Okay. Listen, tell you the truth. If y'all said I said Matthew, I wouldn't believe it until Sister Crusoe said, You said Matthew. Using Matthew. So I said Matthew. What is he reading? Okay, all right. All right, John chapter 7 in New King James, for even his brothers did not believe in him. Verse 5. Does it say anything? Does it say it different?
It said, for neither did his brethren believe in him.
Okay.
About the same.
About the same. All right, all right. So what we have here is even his siblings had difficulty believing in him. So, can you imagine what life was like for Jesus? He's growing up and he knows he's the Son of Man, Son of God. And then his brothers, his siblings come. And of course, we don't find any miracles recorded by Jesus as a child. But Jesus knew what his purpose was, because even at the age of 12, he's in the temple. And he's talking with the doctors and the lawyers. So it had to be a difficult childhood for Jesus, knowing his purpose. All right. Any questions about these controversies? Any questions about the Sabbath? Any questions about that? I'm thinking that they think that he's crazy, because Jesus, as a Jew and as a rabbi, and he was recognized as a rabbi, knew the Sabbath law. But Jesus made statements like he is the Lord of the Sabbath. And Jesus is making statements that he has authority over the Sabbath, because he was before the Sabbath, So how you gonna tell me what I can't do on the Sabbath when I existed before the Sabbath? Well, people are having all kind of problem with Jesus. He talking about he's God. He talking about he's the Son of God. He's forgiving folk of sin. He's eating corn on the Sabbath day, and Jesus takes them back to David eating on the Sabbath, trying to sustain himself. So he's having a difficult time with people, and then his own thinks he's crazy. Well, I think that if somebody today would walk around Hopewell, Petersburg, Prince George, Chester, and say he's the Son of God, we would think he's crazy. We would actually have I would have some difficulty with that. But Jesus is validating his authority by the miracles. Now, let me see if it's in my text. Look at verse 22. And the scribe, I want to come back to this, but I want to read this. And I'm back in Mark now. Yeah, Mark. Okay. Mark 3:22. And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, he has Beelzebub, and by the ruler of the demons he cast out demons. So he called them to himself and said to them in parables. All right. How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but has an end. No one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man, and then he will plunder his house. But surely I say to you, all sins will be forgiven the sons of men, and whatever blaspheming they may utter. This is what we're going to talk about next week. But he who blasphemes against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, but is subject to eternal damnation. I was looking for something else. Okay. What I was looking for, back up to verse number 6. Okay, back up to verse number 6. He heals the man who has the withered hand. Verse number 6, then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him that they might destroy him. All right. The Pharisees and the Herodians are two separate parties. Both of them have political interests. We know more about the Pharisees than we do the Herodians, but their name describes them and gives you indication of their interests. The Herods were like the Roman kings. The Herods were the governmental figures. So when we talk about Herodians, these are groups of Jews who took the side of the Roman government. So they had a political interest where they would support the Roman government. Pharisees were not so much in favor of the Roman government, but the Pharisees held to the law of Moses. But it shows you, and I kind of don't really want to say this, but it shows you how two opposing parties will come together and plot and scheme against what they feel is their enemy. It happens all the time. It happens all the time, you know. Yeah. You want to say a little bit more about that?
Well, you see it all the time, how two people, you know that they don't get along, but they will come together for one main purpose, to destroy one person.
Yeah. And you know, now we could probably have a good discussion about that. Why is that one person so important in your life that you got to go through all that to silence him? And another thing that I've learned is sometimes the two parties that come together, after they come together, if they are successful, they start fighting each other again. Yes, sir.
Let's back up a little bit when you were saying, why do they come together?
Yeah.
Because one of them can't bring him down.
Yeah.
Bad themselves. So they got to come together in order to bring that one person down.
Yeah.
Fight against each other.
They fight, but it's always a fight, ain't it?
Yeah, always.
It's always a fight. And one of the points that I see Jesus making in the passage that I just read, when they accused him of being in league with the devil, Jesus says, how can Satan cast out Satan? If I was in league with the devil, I wouldn't be trying to hurt him. Everything I'm doing is against Satan. So I was looking for something else and I can't find it. What I was looking for is Jesus' response when they asked him about what he was doing on the Sabbath day. And the way he responds to them, is it lawful to do good or evil on the Sabbath day? That Sister Edmonds got it. Is it lawful? Now here's the question. Y'all criticizing me about healing on the Sabbath. And you're criticizing me about what I do in the synagogue. All right. So Jesus, this is how he tries to reason with them. Well, you all tell me, is it lawful to do good or to do evil on the Sabbath day? So either, I know it's the Sabbath, but here's our choice. Your choice is either you're going to do good on the Sabbath or you're going to do evil on the Sabbath. Now, how you going to answer that? You know, he makes it so simple because they had to admit it's lawful to do good. And it was a good thing that Jesus is doing. they were bound to deny that it was lawful to do evil, but it would be evil to leave a man with a withered hand in that condition when they were able to help him. So what Jesus is trying to get them to see with this man with the withered hand is, look, this man, and his hand just didn't get withered, it's been withered. now here's another problem, Russ, in class. Here's another problem. There's things that need to be done that are not done, but somebody comes on the scene and gets it done, and then folk gonna criticize about it being done. Let me see if I can run that back. There are things that need to be done, but nobody gets it done. Then you do it and then get criticized for getting it done. You see the human nature of people.
You have rubbed somebody wrong.
You know, and they're holding on to this law, the law. And Jesus trying to say, look, is it lawful to save a life or to kill it? And Jesus is taking steps to save this man's wretched life. And they were thinking out methods of killing the man. So Jesus really, I mean, he really knew how to deal with people, okay? He really knew how to deal with people, all right? So they thought he was crazy. They thought he was mad based on the things that he had done. But he kept on doing it. So one of the things that I want to say is make sure that what you're doing is right with God. You know, make sure it's right with God. Make sure that what we're doing, we're not doing because we're trying to do our own thing, but it's right with God. But expect criticism. And I think every leader, every Christian who's been about change is going to get some criticism, but make sure that what you're doing is right with God. Can you think of anything that the church does today that the world might think is crazy? A lot of things. Give me one. Give me one. Can you think of anything that the church does or Christians do that the world might criticize as crazy?
We don't use instrumental music to enhance the worship service. I think that's crazy.
And that's a hot topic now. That you know, one of the things that I have seen, we have baptized people, but they are so conditioned to what they are used to that they go back to what they came from because they feel like this is not right because they're so used to what they've been doing. I'm trying to be politically correct in what I'm saying, but I want to say something else, you know, and the instrumental music issue is one of the things. And one of the things that we've got to be able to defend our position of why we do not use instruments. So I'm going to give you one, and then I'll get Sister Buford. One of the things that we use to justify the resurrection of Jesus Christ. How do you justify and prove the resurrection of Jesus Christ? And one of the ways that we do that is historical evidence. That there are a number of people who were eyewitnesses of Jesus. And the argument has been made, none of us met George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, or Frederick Douglass. or George Washington Carver. Let me put some color in it, all right? Yeah. We never met those men, but we believe that they lived based on historical evidence. There's enough historical evidence to support that these men actually lived. That's one of the ways we prove that Jesus was crucified and resurrected from the grave. We can use the same argument. There's enough historical evidence that instrumental music was not used. So, you can take a theological approach, you could take a scriptural approach, and along with that, the historical approach. If instrumental music was used in the worship service of the New Testament church, there should be historical evidence of it. There should be somebody who says the early church used instruments. There's more historical evidence against the use of instrumental music than it is for it. But people outside in the world are so conditioned to the music, then they come here, and if we're not able to teach them, if they don't give themselves enough time to be taught the truth, then they'll leave us and say, oh, well, this is not the real church. And really, it's just not the church that they are accustomed to or used to. So Buford, that.
Growing up in Hopewell, we got a lot of flack for not using the word rapper. And then he said, Mr. Curtis did not mind because Mom explained to him why we weren't allowed to use it. And a lot of other people thought we were being disrespectful to him. You know, he was a civil rights person, but he did.
Yeah.
But we got.
Okay.
And they thought we were crazy and disrespectful.
Yeah. Yeah, religious title, that's another hot button in the Church of Christ now. And and one of the things that I'm seeing is if we don't teach our people, every preacher in the Church of Christ is now a pastor. And we're not teaching people that a preacher can be a pastor if there are other pastors, because pastor and elder and bishop is the same office, but that religious title is just, I'm seeing more people use that, and I'm like, man, where did this come from? And so that's the thing. So yeah, let's just buckle up and put on a seatbelt. People are going to think that we're crazy. And sometimes people think we're crazy when we talk about one church. One church. Someone gave me a topic to preach on out of Ephesians 3 and verse number 10, where it talks about to the intent now that the manifold wisdom of God might be made known by the church. And my understanding of the 3rd chapter of Ephesians is God is bringing Jew and Gentile into one body, and that one body is the one church. It has always been God's mind for there to be one church. And it had always been in God's mind for everybody to be in one church. So this concept of one church blows people's mind. And then some people will say, well, we are part of the one body, but we just worship differently. Well, I think that my response is Jesus made a statement, why do you call me Lord, Lord, but do not the things which I say? So if you're going to call Jesus Lord, then you've got to follow him as Lord, and our worship should be the same. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to share that I've been challenged as of this past week on the scripture of Revelations 16:22. I'm sorry, 22:16. When Jesus says, I have sent my angel to testify unto you these things in the churches, and I'm quite sure that this person has stopped right there because churches here is poor. So I'm supposed to be getting back with her prayerfully today danger.
Yeah.
And so forth. But just wanted to show you how people in the world, and this is, I know you're encouraging us to study, because they're just running to scriptures and pull out one scripture and try to sit down with that scripture, and that's what her thing is. Well, it says church is right here. Jesus says, I have sent my angel to the churches, and she's thinking that it's talking about all these denominations. And so forth.
Yeah.
So it's talking about how people in the world look at us, and we're so hung up on one church.
Yeah.
It says in the book, church is. And
Yeah,
they
yeah.
haven't studied to find out what it's talking about. Speaking vocation.
Yeah, yeah. I think it might be difficult, but what I would try to help her to see that there's a universal church, and then there are local churches, and the local churches collectively make up that one church. You know, we understand that local churches individually are part of the one universal church. But if a person, it takes time to break a person down. it takes time and everything. Okay. All right. So Jesus, is he a maniac? Is he a manipulator? Or is he the Messiah? And of course, we're going to say he's the Messiah. But those in opposition to him is going to see him as crazy. Now, we would probably say that today, when folk think that we're crazy for standing on the faith, that we're demonstrating our faith. That, we'll take the rocks, we'll take the blows, we'll take the insults, we'll take the criticisms. And some folk will say that's crazy, Well, the world's definition of crazy, that might be, I'm thinking of Paul as I close out. 1 Corinthians 1, Paul said, but the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness. But to us who are saved, it is the power of God. So yeah, the world thinks we're crazy, we're moronic, we're out of our mind. And just to make it simple, some folks think we're crazy for coming to church every Sunday. Some folks think we're crazy for keeping the doors open through the pandemic. Some folk think we're crazy for giving as we prosper or being sacrificial in our giving. Some people think we're crazy for the moral stand that we take or live. They think all of that is crazy. But y'all hold to God's unchanging hand. And so next week, what I want to do is talk about this blaspheming of the Holy Spirit and try to close out Mark chapter 3. All right. And we'll get back to normal here with our Wednesday Bible class. And also this will be played tonight at 7 on YouTube and also on Facebook channel. All right. Yes, sir.
You've been telling us, or you're asking us,
Uh-huh.
about inviting people to the church. Right?
Yeah.
When you